All right, today we're going to go on a little journey. We'll start with a raw, messy blueprint and transform it into a really polished professional design. And you know how we're going to do it? By exploring one of the web's oldest, most fundamental elements. Okay, so take a look at this. It's just a mess, right? A total jumble of data. We've got countries, numbers, all mixed together. When a web browser sees this chaos, how on earth does it turn it into something we can actually understand and use? Well, it uses this, the humble, but believe me, incredibly powerful HTML table. I mean, for decades, this has been the go-to tool for organizing data on the web. It's all about turning messy numbers into clean, clear rows and columns, just like you see here with this data on temperature changes from the International Monetary Foundation. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with why tables still matter, then jump into the web's blueprint, HTML. From there, we'll build a data table, add some style with CSS, and wrap up by making sure our tables work absolutely everywhere. First up, why tables still matter. We're going to go from their history and clunky layouts to their modern role with crucial data. You know, way back in the early days of the web, designers didn't have a lot of tools for layout, so they got creative. They started using tables to build entire websites. It was a clever hack for its time, for sure, but it was also kind of misusing the tool. Thankfully, today we have much better ways to handle layout, and tables are back to doing what they were always meant for, displaying data in a nice, organized grid. All right, section 2, the web's blueprint, HTML. This is all about giving structure and meaning to our content. So if tables are for data, how do we actually build one? Well, that brings us right to the foundation of every single web page out there. Before we can even think about making things look pretty with colors or fonts, we have to give our content some solid structure. So HTML, it stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And really, its entire job is to define the structure of your content. It doesn't care one bit what things look like. All it cares about is what things are. You know, is this a heading? Is this a paragraph? Is this a table? That's the information HTML gives to the browser. And the way HTML does this is by using tags. A tag is basically just a label. It has an opening part and a closing part, and you wrap it around your content. It's how you tell the browser, hey, everything between these two pointy brackets, that's a piece of bold text. Or this right here is a table cell. Super simple concept, really. And this basic structure, it's on literally every single web page. You've got the head section, which is for all the behind-the-scenes stuff, like the little page title you see up in your browser tab. And then there's the body, and that holds all the content you actually see on the page. Okay, section 3, building a data table. Now that we understand the basics, it's time to build the actual skeleton of our information. We're going to use a specific set of tags to give our data its shape. All right, let's look at the essential building blocks. The whole thing gets wrapped in a table tag. We can give it a caption, which acts as a title. Then, to keep things organized, we separate the header rows into a 3-head and the main data into a 3-body. Simple enough, right? Then, each 3tr tag defines a row, and inside those rows, 3h creates a bold header cell, while a 3d makes a standard data cell. So when we put all those tags together with our data, this is what the browser spits out. Now, it's not pretty yet, I'll give you that, but look closely, it's already perfectly readable. And that right there is the power of good structure. This is our foundation. You could call it our minimum viable experience. On to section 4. Adding style with CSS. With our skeleton in place, now for the fun part, the transformation. Let's add the style that really brings this table to life. And for that, we're going to turn to cascading style sheets, or as you probably know it, CSS. You know, the classic analogy here is just perfect. If HTML is the skeleton, it gives everything its shape and structure, then CSS is the wardrobe. It's the clothes, the colors, the spacing, the fonts, all the stuff that gives it a unique personality. So the very first thing I always do is tackle the default borders. See, by default, every single cell has its own border with this little gap in between, and it just looks kind of clunky. But one single line of CSS, border collapse, instantly merges them into these clean single lines. It's a huge improvement right off the bat. Okay, next up, let's add a few more professional touches. We'll add some padding so the text isn't all crammed up against the borders. We'll make the header stand out with a background color. That creates a really clear visual hierarchy. We'll align text to the left but numbers to the right. This makes them way easier to scan and compare. And finally, my favorite trick. We add a subtle background color to every other row. It's called zebra striping, and it really helps guide your eye across the table. And look at that. Seriously, with just a handful of simple CSS rules, our plain, boring table is now clear, it's professional, and it's so much easier to read. This is the power of separating your structure from your style. But we're not done yet. A great design has to work for everyone, on any device. Our table looks pretty good on a desktop for sure, but we still have a few modern challenges to solve to make it truly responsive and accessible for all. So, here's a problem I'm sure you've run into. Our table looks great on a big screen, right? But what happens when you try to look at it on your phone? If you have too many columns, the table is suddenly wider than the screen, and it just breaks the whole page layout. You're forced to scroll the entire page sideways, which is just a terrible experience. The solution, though, is surprisingly elegant. All we do is wrap our table in another container, like a div, and then we apply one simple CSS rule to that wrapper: overflow scroll. And just like that, now only the table itself scrolls horizontally, while the rest of the page stays perfectly in place. So much better. But wait, when we scroll sideways, we lose track of the row headers, right? It's hard to know what the data even means anymore. We can fix that with sticky positioning. It's a three-step process. First, we tell that first header cell in each row to have a position sticky. Second, we anchor it to the left edge so it stays put. And third, and this is important, we give it a solid background color so that as we scroll, the other cells slide neatly underneath it instead of over it. And last but definitely not least, we have to make sure this is accessible to everyone. By adding tab index equals 0 to our scrolling container, we're letting people who can't use a mouse focus on it with their keyboard and then use their arrow keys to scroll. Super important. Then, we add our role attribute to tell screen reader software, hey, this is a distinct scrollable part of the page. This gives users with visual impairments context so they can navigate the data effectively. And what's really cool is, as the web accessibility expert Adrian Rosselli points out, you can even write your CSS so that it only applies these advanced styles if the proper accessibility markup is actually in place. I mean, that's a really powerful way to connect good, clean code directly to an inclusive and accessible user experience. And there you have it. From a total jumble of data to a fully styled, responsive, and accessible table. We've really seen how that timeless principle of separating structure from style lets us build some pretty powerful things on the web. HTML tables helped give structure to the web's past, turning chaos into clarity. So my final question for you is this. As our data gets more and more complex, what new ideas are we going to need to give structure to its future?